بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وبه نستعين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Thank you for joining us for the first session of the parent talks. Inshallah, we hope to continue these talks once a month, preferably at the end of the month, inshallah. This week, or this month, the topic that we've chosen to speak about is common questions that teenagers may ask you about faith. We want to understand what those questions are, be able to categorize them, and then what sort of an approach should you have. Now, because today we won't be touching upon any one particular question, I'm not going to go through the details of the answer to a question, but I'll share about 6 or 7 different principles that we should observe in trying to answer these questions, inshallah. Now, a lot of these questions, when they're asked in the form of an objection or in the form of a doubt that somebody might have. In the Arabic language, this is known as a shubha. Or, for example, when they talk about many of these doubts, they say these are shubuhat. Now, the word shubha in the Arabic language comes from the word shabi. Shabi means something which is similar. The reason why a doubt is called a shubha, because when you look at the doubt, or when you think about the fallacy, it seems true. It resembles the truth. It is very similar to the truth, but it is not the truth. It is a fallacy. Now, you find that during the lifetime of our Imam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, here's some notes at the entrance over there. During the lifetime of our Imams, they would pay a lot of focus and attention to such doubts. If somebody ever came up with a question, Assalamu alaikum, note at the beginning there.
Thank you.
Yeah. If somebody ever had a question or a doubt about an issue of faith, the Imam would not shun that person. The Imam would approach that person and try to answer his doubt. Even if it was about some of the most fundamental aspects of faith, the Imam would pay attention to it. The reason being is because when these doubts go unchecked, or if we allow these doubts to linger, or if these doubts become too many, then they start attacking a person's faith, they try to weaken that person's faith, or eventually they can destroy a person's faith. So it's very important, as a child is growing up, when these doubts start to appear, or these questions start to appear, that we don't shun those questions away, but rather we approach them and we deal with them. Now, I'm going to be making reference to a particular book for those who speak Farsi or read Farsi. It's a wonderful book. It's called Sirah Tarbiyati Payambaro Ahl Bayt, the methodology of the Prophet and the infallible Imams in training and nurturing children. And he gives 2 examples over here, which I thought were very interesting. Now, it turns out that during the time of the 6th Imam, a new phenomenon started to appear within the Muslim world. You have to understand that the time of the 6th Imam was a time when people from all across the Muslim and non-Muslim world were coming to Medina. Medina was the center of learning, this university where everybody used to come. So Muslims used to come, but even non-Muslims used to come. And they would bring their ideologies. And one of the things that started to appear at the time of our 6th Imam was atheism and materialism. This was an issue, and many doubts started to appear at that time. The 2 examples that I want to share with you. The first one is, many of you must have heard of a hadith known as the hadith of Mufaddal. The hadith of Mufaddal was one of the companions of our 6th Imam. And he was a very close companion of the 6th Imam. In this lengthy hadith, the Imam explains to him the wisdom behind God's creation. Why did God create the human being the way he is? Why did he give him the anatomy that he has? And why did God create the world the way it is right now? But that hadith has a story behind it. The story behind it goes this way, that Mufaddal was once seated at the mosque, or near the mosque. And Ibn Abil Awja, who was an atheist at that time, came to Mufaddal and asked him a question about, what is the purpose of creation? If there is wisdom in creation, how come I can't see the wisdom and the purpose within creation? So Mufaddal was not able to answer this question. He became very upset. He went to our 6th Imam, and the Imam said to him, come tomorrow morning, I will share a hadith with you. And so the whole hadith of Mufaddal The Imam is trying to explain to him the purpose behind creation and to remove that doubt that Mufaddal had in his heart. Second example that I wish to share with you is the example of the great theologist by the name of Hisham ibn al-Hakam. He was one of the very close and one of the specialists amongst the companions of the sixth Imam. One day, one of the atheists came and asked him, "Do you believe in a God that is all-powerful?" And Hisham said, "Indeed, I believe in a God who is all-powerful, not only powerful, but all-dominant as well." He said, "Very well, I have a question for you." Now, this question in this day and age is asked a little differently. I'll tell you how it's asked today. But back then, he said to him, "Can your God make an egg go through the eye of a needle without making the egg smaller or the eye of the needle bigger?" If your God is all powerful, can he make an egg go through the eye of a needle? And Hisham got stuck. So he said to him, "Can you give me some time?" And he went to the sixth Imam and said, "This is a shubha or an objection that has come. How do I answer it?" And the Imam gave him an answer. Before we come to that answer, my first question to you is, in this day and age, how is this question posed? Has something to do with the stone.
And God created a stone that cannot lift himself.
Yeah, can God create a stone that he cannot lift himself? If you say no, then God is incapable. If you say yes, then God becomes incapable. Huh? So the Imam in this case did not give him a very philosophical answer. There is a philosophical answer to this. The Imam gave him a simple answer, an answer that would be convincing. Sometimes you don't have to become very philosophical about your answer. Sometimes the simplest of answers are the best of answers. Imam said to him, "Can you see a whole mountain?" And he said, "Yes." The Imam said to him, "Didn't God make the whole mountain pass through the needle of your eye?" Right? Didn't God make that happen? Because that's an answer for you. At a philosophical level, the answer to that is, God does not, and we have no problem in saying, God cannot do things which are logically impossible. Because if God starts doing things which are logically impossible, then logic breaks down. And if logic breaks down, I no longer have any tool for understanding God. The moment you say God can do things which are logically impossible, then logical impossibilities become possible, and then at that time, any logical argument that you bring forth, it could be right and wrong at the same time. So God cannot do things which are logically impossible. Naturally impossible, yes, but logically impossible, no. In any case, what we see is that when such questions came up during the time of our Imam, the Imams did not turn away from these questions. They actually faced them, they dealt with them, and they approached them with a logical and rational manner. Now, the next question that we want to look at is, how do you categorize these questions? Because they seem to be so many questions, they seem to be so diverse. At one moment they could be asking you about prayer, at the second moment they can be asking you about life after death, at the third moment you could be asked about morality itself. How do you categorize these questions? Before we come to categorizing this question, the first question that I have for you is, how do you model religion? When somebody asks you, what is religion? What is your answer to that question? What is religion? Do we have a clear definition for what is religion?
It's a way of life.
It's a way of life?
Under the command of Allah.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Excellent.
A collection of laws and beliefs.
A collection of laws and beliefs. Yes. Anybody else? Same, right. So Shaykh Murtaza says, the first thing we ought to understand is religion always, any religion, be it Islam or Christianity or Judaism, always has two components. The first component is a set of beliefs, how you should perceive the world. An understanding of reality has absolutely nothing to do with your responsibilities, nothing to do with your actions or your behavior, just your perception of the world. A perception that is greater than how another animal would perceive the world. A perception with intellection, a perception with concepts, okay? A perception of the world. These are our beliefs. Then a second aspect or second component of religion is that it also has a set of ethical instructions or a set of laws in accordance to its beliefs and its understanding of the world. In other words, sometimes people ask, what is our purpose and goal in life? I'll come to this question, but one of the things we point out is that, look, our purpose is always proportional to our potentials, right? Our purpose has to be proportional to our potential. If we don't have the potential to do something, it is not just for God to have that expectation from us, okay? What potentials do we have? As a human being, think about it. From the morning that you wake up until at night you go to sleep, you take all the verbs that you can do, possibly. You find that you can categorize them into two categories of verbs. The first category are verbs of understanding, right? Functions of the mind. You're able to understand, you're able to contemplate, remember, memorize, analyze, everything that the mind can do. And the second set of verbs are what your body can do. You can run, you can cook, you can eat, you can drink, you can wear clothes, you can shake hands with somebody, you can help somebody, you can destroy something. So you have two potentials within you. The first potential to understand reality, and the second potential to act upon your understanding of reality. Well, God's expectations are always proportional to your potential. God expects that you will understand some things through your lifetime, and God expects that you will do some things through your lifetime. And therefore, every religion must have a set of beliefs, and every religion must have a set of practices as well. Now, in the context that we're in the context of Islam, our set of beliefs, what do we call them? We call them our aqa'id. And our set of practices, what do we call them? We call them akhlaq, ethics, and ahkam, laws, right? One day they say the Prophet of Allah entered the masjid and he saw people gathering around one person. So they asked, who is this person? And they say to him, oh, he is an allama. And for those of you who know the Arabic language, you know a person who's knowledgeable is an alim, one who's very knowledgeable is allam, and one who's extremely knowledgeable is allama. So the Prophet was intrigued. He said, what exactly does this person know? They say to him, this person knows the history of the Arabs. He knows the poetry of the Arabs. He knows the linealogy of the Arabs. Who is the son of who, the son of who, the son of who. He knows all of this information. And the Prophet heard this, he smiled. And he said, this is knowledge. The one who knows it is not benefited by it. And the one who's ignorant of it is not harmed by not knowing this. So then they asked him, what is knowledge? And the Prophet said, knowledge is three things. One, the Prophet said, it is ayatun muhkama, a firm sign. Our scholars say this refers to the beliefs of our faith. وَفَرِيضَةٌ عَادِلَةٌ, and a just obligation. This refers to the ahkam, the laws of our faith. وَسُنَّةٌ قَائِمَةٌ, and an established practice. And this refers to the morals and the ethics of our faith. Therefore, whenever you read the Quran, whenever you read a hadith, whenever you read a book on Islam, it's always trying to teach you one of three things. Either it's trying to teach you about the beliefs of our faith, or about the ethics of our faith, or about the laws of our faith. All right? That's very important. Sometimes in the Quran we'll talk about science. Sometimes in the Quran we'll talk about history. It's not talking about history for the sake of history. It's talking about history because that history can be used to understand a belief of our faith or an ethic of our faith. If it talks about science, the Quran is not a book of science. If it talks about science, it's because science is a means, is an ayah, is a sign of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for us to understand who God is, and therefore even there it's talking about a belief of our faith. Now if that's clear in our mind, we have a very good model of what our religion is. Beliefs, ethics, and laws. Well, when you get doubts and questions, they always fall into one of these three categories. It's either a doubt or an objection about the belief of faith, or a question about the ethics of faith, or a question about the laws of our faith. Now, questions also are of two types. Simple questions are what, when, where, how. Difficult questions are why. The questions we're dealing with are why questions, okay? Now, if we come to our notes, does everybody have a copy? In the middle, I say, let us consider some common questions under each category. So this is not a comprehensive list. This is just an example of what you can find under each category. For example, in aqaid and beliefs, one of the things you commonly hear today is there is no scientific proof for the existence of God. If God exists, how come the scientists have not been able to demonstrate that? Evolution negates the need for the existence of God. We used to believe we need God because of the complexity of life on earth, but now we have a process or a theory called the theory of evolution, and you no longer need the concept of God to explain why we need or how human beings came about to be on the face of this earth. If God exists, right, then why is there so much suffering in the world around us? This is a very important question today, right? When people look at natural disasters, when they look at children who are born with birth defects, for example, when they look at innocent people being killed by other people, they ask the question, well, question number one, is it that God does not know about it? And what will you say? No, of course God knows about it. Question number two, is it that God is not able to do something about it? What will you say? You'll say, of course God is able to do something about it. Okay, so God knows about it, and God is able to do something about it. Is it that God doesn't care about it? You'll say, no, of course God cares. We believe that God is Arhamar Rahimin, the most merciful of the merciful. Okay, so if God knows about it, and He can do something about it, and He also cares about it, then why is it that He isn't doing something about it? Is it because God doesn't exist? The problem of evil is not a problem that only questions the justice of God. It's a problem in this day and age that questions the very existence of God. I've come across people who've lost faith in the existence of God because of the problem of evil. So it's an important question. If God is merciful, then why do we have Jahannam and hellfire? Right? If God was merciful, there should be no hellfire. Or, if God is so merciful, why is there eternal punishment? Okay? Some people who have been punished for a while, they've paid for their sins. Like, how long did they sin for? They sinned for 80 years in this world. Let's assume the whole 8 years of their life they sinned. But when they go in the hereafter, punish them for 80 years. Okay, double it, 160. Why does it have to be so many years? Why does it have to be an infinite period of time? Okay? Is felicity only found in being a Muslim? That's another very important question today. Is Islam the only path to salvation? Or are there other paths to salvation as well? What happens when a non-Muslim performs a good deed? What happens when a non-Muslim doesn't know about Islam, but they follow the truth? Whatever truth they've come across, they follow it. Will such a person go to paradise? Or will they still be going to hellfire? You have to be very careful with this question, because today if you say that only Muslims, out of those Muslims, only Shia will go to Jannah, so we have a population of 7 billion people around the world. Of them, Muslims are 1.1 billion or 1.2 billion, maybe 1.5. Okay, Shias out of them are 200 million. So you're saying out of 7 billion people, only 200 million people will go to paradise because they happen to be Shia. What about the other people? Did God create them for hellfire? Now, I'm not trying to answer these questions right now. I'm just trying to point out to you, these are very important questions that will come up in the mind of a teenager as he's growing up, especially when he's growing up in a pluralistic society. See, we lived in societies, if you came from traditional societies, you lived with people who are Muslims around you. So these questions did not come up for you as much. But today when you come and you have a neighbor who's very kind to you, he helps you more than, for example, a Muslim friend helps you or a Muslim brother helps you, then such a question becomes a very important question for you. And it's a question that starts to shake your faith sometimes. And then, of course, in Aqaid, one of the most important questions that you will receive is, what is the purpose of creation? And why did God create us? And it's a loaded question as well, right? One of the other questions you receive is, well, who created us? God created us. And who created? God, right? So these are questions that you receive in Aqaid. Coming down to akhlaq, morality or ethics, does a person have to be religious to be moral? I get this question asked all the time, right? Why do you need religion if you can just be a moral person? I've seen people who have very good morals, even though they don't have religion. And we've seen people who have religion, but they don't have good morals at all. Now, this is not a new question. This month of Ramadan, I was going through some hadith, came across a very interesting hadith. In this hadith, somebody came and asked, I believe it was our sixth Imam. He says to the sixth Imam that I came across some of your Shias, and they were the most immoral people I came across, the worst people ever. And then I came across some people who weren't Shias, they were Muslim, but they weren't your Shias, and they were really good, they're very kind, they're very generous, perhaps the best people ever. Then tell me, Imam, what is the value of being a Shia of yours? We actually have a hadith about this, and the Imam gives an answer to that question. But I find that question is coming up over and over again. Now this question falls under the discussion of ethics and morality. Is it okay to be self-confident? We teach our children not to be proud. not to, for example, and to be humble in life. But then we also teach them you can achieve things in life, be self-confident, have self-esteem, you know. So is there a contradiction over there or not? Are ethics universal or are they relative to one society? Is it that ethics, you know, are the same no matter which society you go to, no matter which era you're in, no matter which time you're in? Or is it that in our society we have a particular set of ethics, at the Prophet's time we had another set of ethics, and maybe that which was ethical at the time of the Prophet is no longer ethical today? For example, I'm just giving this as an example, I'm not trying to answer any question. Maybe at that time slavery was ethical, but today we know it's not ethical. So maybe it's possible some things that were ethical back then are no longer ethical today, or some things that weren't ethical back then could be ethical today, if ethics are not universal, right? Maybe same-gendered relationships were not ethical back then, but maybe they are today. I'm just throwing out questions. Okay. What is the difference between ethics and etiquettes, for example? Why are there different ethics for dealing with Muslims and non-Muslims? And is same-gendered relationship moral or immoral? The third set of questions you'll get are about the ahkam, and again, this is not a comprehensive list, but some of the question is, why do we pray 5 times a day? And one of the most asked questions is, why do I have to pray 5 times a day? In the sense that, why do I have to do wudu? Why do I have to stand up? Why do I have to bow? Why do I have to prostrate? If I want to pray, why can't I just sit in my home and in my heart pray to God in my own language? Isn't that a more powerful prayer than me doing a set of rituals 5 times a day, repeating it over and over again? You'd be surprised the number of times I've been asked this question in the last year. It's a burning question amongst our youth right now. Why do women have to cover their hair? You know, if they have morality within them, in their heart, then why do they have to express it in their bodies, for example? Why do I have to perform rituals if I can be a moral person? Why can't we listen to music? And one of the most asked questions is, anything that's fun is most probably forbidden in Islam. You know, it's not Islam, it's hard. So why is everything fun forbidden in Islam? And is that true, or is that a fallacy? Are there any other questions that you've come across that fall into one of these 3 categories? I'm sure there are many. No? Can you give me some examples? Yes.
The question is, I've seen like we all deal with these questions now and again.
Yes.
Even with the younger kids
Yes.
being in West. My mind wanders that how do we find answers to some of them to begin the conversation with our children? What should we
Sure.
do?
Sure. And that's the next part of our conversation today. Yeah. Inshallah. Like I said.
Especially the question which comes around, like even when we go to why you are fasting, why you fast,
Why do you fast?
why do you fast?
What's the philosophy behind
What's
fasting?
the philosophy?
What's the
Why-
wisdom
why,
behind
like,
fasting?
You know, a certain days you fast and then
Yeah.
keep yourself like away from all food and everything.
Exactly,
Why?
especially when Ramadan comes in the summer months and you're fasting for 17, 18 hours. What sane person would do
Especially
that?
when, like, you know, when the girls
Yes.
like they're like 9 years of age,
Exactly.
they're so small, why you are making them fast?
Fast.
and all that.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
that's what the question
Good.
comes from.
Okay, good. So like I say, today I'm not, sorry.
We've had discussions around things like gambling,
Okay.
differences between drugs and alcohol,
Mm-hmm.